BCA 101, week 2. We're going to do a little bit of a summary. And we'll get started right away. Okay. I do a lot of representation if you were on campus. NIACC accesses the internet. I actually have 2 connections in, and then we reviewed a little bit bits per second. That's how we measure, in fact, and that's how we pay for that bandwidth. Okay, same thing, you know, anybody connected in. I show this pipe here for Google connected in, and I'll talk about this in a minute. Canvas. So here at NIACC we have a local area network, and things are to get hooked together either with wireless, and there's different types of wireless, or fiber optic. And we looked at some examples of those in class. When you leave NIACC, and let's say you're on your smartphone and you go through one of these routes and you happen to go to Google to read maybe your email, now that's a WAN. We're moving through a provider over some geographical distance. And typically it's through a provider. For example, the internet's. Somebody's providing our access through the internet. And later on we'll show you, you could pay a provider to connect between 2 locations. It doesn't have to be through the internet. So in our diagram we were talking a little bit about then the whole concept of being able to share major things through a network. And I'll review that briefly. We can share info, maybe a devices like printers and so forth, and software or applications. And by far information is what we share the most. We take data, move it around, and make it information. Then we moved into file management. You can have like your PC, and you can store things on its hard drive, and then it keeps track of what's where in a hierarchy, and they usually refer to those as folders. And you'll hear me refer to them as directories also. And we talk about then storing one or 2 things, either data or the software that manipulates the data. So when we refer to files, that's what we're referring to. It's either the data or the software to manipulate the file. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. We talked about where it's stored. For example, in the IT area at the college, we can have a data server where students can store it there. If they're on a regular campus, they can store it on the data server there. That would be, both of those would be via a network. We have an Angel server on campus, and when you submit, let's say you submit a file and you're coming in from home, okay, so let's just say here's your little network at home, and you have, let's say, a laptop and it's got a hard drive, and you say, okay, I just finished my work, so let's say you use Microsoft Word to create a file. So that's the data file. Microsoft Word itself is the software. Then you can take a copy, if you have internet access, and bring a copy here, come all the way over, and it actually stores it on the server there. And then Mr. Dirksen, maybe I'm working in a lab here on campus on a PC, I can go into Angel and get that information and bring it back to my PC so I can see it. So you're storing a data file that was manipulated by some software. And we talk about where we store it. And we'll talk a little more about files and directories in another review. Okay, so let's go ahead and move forward. First of all, I can add to our last comments here. Here I showed an example of home, and you could pay a provider if you want to connect from your house to somewhere else. And you would pay a provider, then that would create a wide area network. The little network you have at home, maybe you have your phone on your Wi-Fi at home, and maybe a laptop, and maybe even a desk computer. And so that's your LAN. And you can create a WAN by going through the internet also. You can connect two locations using a VPN, virtual private network, and also create your own WAN through the internet. I promised to mention this. At the college, we use Angel, and it's supported right at the college. That information is stored on servers at NIACC. So when you save to Angel or go to a Dropbox, it goes into NIACC and stores it there. By summer, it'll be stored in the cloud at Canvas. We're going to switch to a different learning management system, and Angel will be out by June, and Canvas will be in, and we're already training and working on it right now. So once it's Canvas, okay, then if you're working from home, you'll go through the internet. Let me use the blue again, and you'll store it on their location, the cloud. And then when Mr. Dirksen wants to look at it, he'll bring a copy of it. Let's say I'm working at home, and bring it to my house where I can look at it. I think it's really important to understand what you're saving and where you're saving it. Okay, so let me emphasize that just a little bit more. Here's an example. Microsoft Word would be the software or the application, and it produces a data document, and the document would have some extension that indicates what it is. Okay, so we have these different extensions, and there are lots of extensions. So applications produce a file, a data file, typically then with some type of an extension. Okay, I beat that. 3 more slides. I talked here about class prepped items that should all be done. Those, plus I believe I looked through all those and have responded. Assignment 1 should be done. Okay, software and hardware. Let's talk about software. 2 different major types that we're going to talk about in this class. We have applications and system software. The system software is made up of the operating system and utilities. Utilities might be some type of file management software. Okay, you might open up a piece of software that allows you to create folders, create that hierarchy, create some folders and some folders underneath to where we can store our data files. Utilities would allow us to create maybe passwords for separate accounts on your computer. Like if you have kids, you give them an account, you could give them a quota on how much space they can use. We will talk a lot about utilities throughout the the term. The utilities give us a little bit of an insight into the operating system. The operating system is key to the computer. The operating system manages the hardware. System software manages the hardware, and applications then connect to system software. We'll clarify that in a minute. Over here, I listed some operating systems. Students listed operating systems over here. If you have a Chromebook, we have Chrome. If you have an Apple product like an iPhone or an iPad, like I'm doing this work on, that's small I OS. Android is another type of operating system for devices, small mobile devices like smartphones and other kinds of tablets. Windows 8, Windows 10 from Microsoft, extremely popular. Linux, and different types of distributions of Linux like Mint, Ubuntu, Fedora, and so forth. So Linux is an open source software. And then Macintosh has an operating system. One I didn't mention in class, Unix from in the past, and there are others, okay? But these are the ones that are most familiar with for us, because these run in PCs, phones, or laptops, and so forth, depending on which is which, okay? They communicate to hardware. So these are all operating systems. I mentioned UI up here, very important part of system software, especially in the operating system. User interface. How do the user interface with the software? Quick hardware review. This is the box. In there, processor, some chips to represent memory, RAM. There's some chips in there, read-only memory, that have what we call firmware. That's always there. And the other term we use is storage. So we want to distinguish. Storage tends to be, maybe you have a USB drive, maybe a DVD, a hard drive, or a solid state drive. Where we put things permanently, we refer to as storage. In order for the processor to work on anything, it has to be in memory. And then it moves along electronic bus to the processor and back to memory. And then if you need it to save something, let's say out on a USB drive, the operating system then would write it out to the B drive, or the operating system would put it on the hard drive, or burn a DVD. Yeah, you notice? Yeah, be careful there. I said the OS, the operating system, because it manages the hardware. And then the application works through the operating system. We got a diagram for that. This processor can do arithmetic and make logical decisions. We call it an ALU, the arithmetic logic unit. And that's all it can do. It can, it can move bits around, and then it can look and see if greater than, less than, or equal to, and that's it. Then based on that, the software then makes a decision. Proprietary software, typically you lease that software. You get to, you pay money to use it, and they'll use the term you can't decompile it. You can't, we talk about that more later on. It's proprietary. They own, whoever created the software owns the rights to the software. And then typically you pay for a license for that. That would be companies like Microsoft, maybe Adobe, and literally thousands of others. Okay? Open source, when people code, they write lines of code that then is converted into some executable software. Okay? For example, putty.txt .exe, you were to download that, you have to be careful to make sure you get the right one. putty.org is the best place to get that. But that's an executable piece of software. Somebody wrote the code and then compiled it into an executable software, and you can put that on your computer and execute it, run it. Okay? This here, coding, is called the source code. And open means anybody can look at it or use it or have it, change it, or whatever. Putty was created with an open source license, which if you want to change it or adjust it, you could decompile it and look at the code and then rewrite it if you had the ability to do that. Most people, when they hear this, they think of no money, free, and that is true. Open source is free. You can change it, adjust it, and try to sell it, but it wouldn't make any sense trying to sell it because originally it's free, so nobody typically would pay for that. Alright, now we got one more slide. It's almost midnight. Okay, we already talked about proprietary and open source. And so we'll finish up with this. If this is the hardware, what communicates with the hardware is the operating system. What communicates with the operating system is the app. And what communicates with the app are the people. Most people would like to be able to use apps to get the operating system to tell the hardware what they want to do. In this class, we want you to be a little more of an expert, so maybe you not only will use an app efficiently, like word processing or spreadsheets, you will also be able to manipulate the operating system a little bit and get it to do what you want. And we're real close in this class, but we don't quite do it, to where we take you and let you actually mess with the hardware, like add a card or something. We don't actually do that, but it really wouldn't be hard to do in this class. And so that's a review of week 2, and pretty much finishes up Unit 1.